The path to enlightenment is inward. You didn't come here by accident. Perhaps a part of you is searching for peace. If that's true, subscribe to Buddha Pray and stay with this video until the end, because here, every day, there are stories made just for your soul, out of all the paths in this noisy world. Have you ever asked yourself, how can I truly awaken if I'm still losing myself in this chaotic life? Maybe you believed you must succeed first before you can find peace. You must surpass everyone else to finally be happy. But what if awakening is not out there, but in here? What if what you've been searching for all this time isn't a new path, but a hidden light already glowing within you? If your heart feels lost, if you've ever been so tired you didn't want to try anymore, then pause for a moment with me, because today's story might just be the doorway that leads you gently back to yourself. Eldon was a quiet man, not the kind of silence that made people uneasy, but the kind of silence that came from carrying something too heavy for too long. He lived in a small, weathered cottage at the edge of a dense forest. Every morning, he lit his forge before the sun had fully risen, and as the village was still yawning awake, Eldon was already hammering steel into swords, tools, and hinges. Metal obeyed him, but life never had. Many years ago, Eldon had a wife and a daughter with golden hair who laughed like bells in the wind. But one winter night, a fire, started by a roaming band of thieves, swallowed them both. Only ashes remained. Since then, Eldon had spoken very little. He never remarried, never moved. He simply worked, because work was the only thing that didn't betray him. One morning, as Eldon was shaping a blade, a knock came at his door. It was not a villager. It was an old monk, wrapped in robes the colour of dried earth. "Master Eldon," the monk said gently, "my name is Lin. I am the caretaker of a monastery deep in the mountains. We are in need of a great bell, not just one that rings, but one that awakens." Eldon looked up, silent. "Will you forge it?" Lin asked. Eldon nodded once. "The next week," he began. He measured, melted, moulded. He poured every ounce of precision into the shape, the thickness, the symmetry, and finally, after 3 weeks, the bell stood tall and majestic. It was lifted to the temple's tower. The villagers gathered for the first chime. Eldon struck the bell. Nothing, not even a hum, just silence. He frowned, checked the casting, tried again. Nothing. He returned home and began again. New alloys, new tools, new calculations. He delivered the second bell. They struck it. Still no sound. Frustration cracked his focus. He blamed his age. He blamed the metal, but never once did he stop to listen. Then one day, while adjusting the mold of the third attempt, Eldon collapsed. The next thing he saw was the face of the monk, Lin, kneeling beside him. "You work too hard," Lin said. "I must get it right." "You are trying to fix what you see," the monk said. "But have you listened to what you feel?" Eldon didn't answer. Lin poured him tea and added, "A bell does not ring if the one who shapes it is filled with noise. When the heart is unsettled, the sound cannot find its way." That night, for the first time in decades, Eldon sat still. No hammering, no smoke, no plans, just stillness. He remembered his daughter's laugh. He remembered the warmth of his wife's hand and the bitter taste of the guilt he had swallowed for years, for not saving them. And then he cried. Not a loud cry, but a quiet, trembling release, as if the grief had been waiting decades long for permission. The next morning, he returned to his forge, but this time His hands were lighter, his movements slower, not because he was weak, but because he was finally present. He melted a final blend of metals. As he worked, he whispered old memories into the fire. He offered them up. He didn't try to forget. He tried to forgive. Weeks later, the final bell was hung in the monastery tower. Eldon was there. They asked him to strike it. He lifted the wooden mallet, paused, then swung. A sound, deep, clear and pure, echoed across the valley. Birds stirred from the trees. The crowd fell silent, and for a moment it felt like the entire mountain exhaled. Eldon closed his eyes, not in pride, but in peace. He never forged another bell after that. He didn't need to. In the story of Eldon, the blacksmith, many will see a tale about craftsmanship, grief, and redemption, but beneath it all lies something deeper, a lesson about the inner path. Eldon was not defeated by metal, he was defeated by noise, the noise inside him. No matter how precise his hands were, no matter how skilled his calculations, his creation remained silent because he was not yet ready to hear it. This is one of the central truths of the Buddha's teaching. To conquer oneself is a greater victory than to conquer 1,000 in battle. Dhammapada, verse 103. What does this mean? It means that the loudest battlefield is not outside, it's inside. And only when we make peace with that inner turmoil can anything truly resonate. Why didn't the bell ring? Because the bell was honest. It reflected the maker. The bell refused to sing, not out of flaw, but out of compassion. It echoed Eldon's grief, not his skill. It mirrored the tightness in his chest, the silence in his soul. We all have bells in our lives that don't ring, efforts that fall short, relationships that don't heal, spiritual practices that feel empty, not because they are broken, but because we have not yet gone inward. The path to enlightenment is not built, it is uncovered. Eldon tried to build his way to success. He used knowledge, effort, control, but wisdom cannot be built. It must be uncovered by removing what blocks it. Peace comes from within, do not seek it without. The Buddha, when Eldon finally sat in stillness, when he stopped doing and began being, when he allowed his pain to speak, that's when healing began. He didn't need new materials, he needed a new relationship with himself. Forgiveness is the first chime of awakening. Many people think enlightenment is about great insight or spiritual power, but sometimes it starts with something as simple as forgiveness. Eldon carried guilt. He blamed himself for the fire. He thought his grief was a burden, but in truth, that grief was a bell, waiting to ring. The Buddha taught that the path to liberation begins with understanding suffering, not avoiding it, not hiding from it, but looking straight into it and offering it compassion. Just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life. The Buddha, a spiritual life is not about escaping pain, it's about transforming it. So what does this mean for us? You might not be a blacksmith, you may not live alone in a forest, but surely you've built things in life that didn't ring, a career that looked good but felt hollow, a relationship that made sense but lacked peace, a version of yourself you tried to perfect but never felt authentic. We all do it, we all chase outer form, hoping for inner harmony, but the bell will not ring until the maker is still. The inward path is not far away, it's always right here. You don't need to travel to a monastery, you don't need to change your name, you don't need to wait for the perfect moment. You only need to pause, to breathe, to listen, not to the world, but to the quiet voice within. That voice, that space inside you, that's where the bell lives. And when you are ready, when your heart is honest, when your wounds are seen with love, the bell will ring. Final thought to the viewer. The bell in the story was never broken, just waiting, and maybe, so are you. Maybe you are not broken. Maybe you are simply a bell that hasn't been struck the right way. Not because you failed, but because you've been too busy surviving to pause and listen. In a world that rewards noise, constant action, endless productivity, the chase for more, how rare it is to just stop, to sit, to feel, to ask yourself, is this really who I am? What if the emptiness you feel is not a curse, but an invitation to look within, to forgive, to soften, to wake up? Let me ask you, have you ever tried everything and still felt nothing? Have you ever wondered why, despite all the external success, your heart feels like a stranger's home? Have you ever sat in silence and realized you don't even know who you are anymore? If yes, then don't run from that feeling. That feeling is sacred. That feeling is your soul whispering, "Come home." And now, a deeper question. For those who dare to answer, if you stopped trying to become someone and just allowed yourself to be, what would remain? Would you feel lost or finally free? Comment your answer below and be honest, because maybe your comment is exactly what someone else needed to read today. Let's talk about what no one wants to admit. We're all trying to escape something. Some of us run to success, some to relationships, some to distractions, some even run into spirituality, hoping rituals and mantras will fix what's broken inside. But you can't trick the truth. And the truth is this: healing doesn't come from escape. It comes from return. Return to what? Return to yourself. Not the version others expect, not the one polished for Instagram, but the raw, quiet you who's been waiting patiently beneath all the layers. But you want peace? Don't look out. Look in. You don't need more. You need less noise, less pretending, less running. You need the courage to sit down with your own heart and listen, just like Eldon did. When he finally stopped fighting the silence began to sing. Let's create something beautiful together. In the comments below, share one thing. What is the bell in your life that hasn't rung yet? Is it your purpose, your truth, a relationship you've been afraid to repair, a part of yourself you've locked away? Let this space, this very video, be where your healing begins. And if this story touched you, do this now. Leave a comment, write as if you're speaking to your inner self. Your words might unlock someone else's pain. Subscribe to the channel, not just to follow, but to journey together. Each week we share stories that awaken, soothe, and remind us what truly matters. Share this video with someone you love, or someone who's been quiet lately. The bell of their soul may just be waiting for this moment. A spark of controversy. For deeper reflection, some say you don't need to heal, you just need to be stronger. But is that true? Should we keep pushing or start listening? Should we build walls around our hearts or open them slowly even if it hurts? Some will say feeling is weakness, but maybe feeling is the only true strength. What do you think? Argue it out, but with compassion. This comment section is your mirror. One last thing. When Eldon struck the final bell, he didn't do it with strength. He did it with surrender. He stopped trying to force peace. He allowed peace to find him. Maybe that's what we all need to do. Stop forcing. Start feeling. Stop searching. Start seeing. Close your eyes and ask yourself this. Right now, in this moment, are you truly here or just passing through? If you hear even the faintest whisper in your chest that says, "Come back to me," then don't ignore it. Don't scroll away. Don't rush into the next thing. Just pause, breathe, and listen. There is a bell within you, and when you're ready, it will ring.